All right, so let's just get straight into it. Let's cut out all the bullshit. I
Sounds
think
good.
the most important question when it comes to advertising is what is good advertising and what is bad advertising, and how do you tell the difference, and how do you eventually make the bad advertising go away? I know we live in a capitalist society, and everything we do is about selling things, and the only way to sell something is to advertise that it's for sale. So I think it's totally reasonable for you to let me know that your new product is for sale, how much it costs, things like that. I think those are totally acceptable forms of advertising, in the form of a TV commercial, in the form of a billboard, a newspaper ad, things that are all like really recognizable. I think our society, as it is currently structured, couldn't really function without that, because, you know, when you build your whole society around buying things, you have to have some way of making some kind of informed decision about buying them, right?
Yeah, agreed. I personally generally hate ads in all forms, but I definitely understand why a good majority of them exist. Like, I mean, there's literally every product sitting on my desk right now I probably wouldn't have known about if it hadn't been for advertising. Like,
all right, I'm going to challenge you. I don't think you hate ads in all forms. Do you like movie trailers?
I don't really watch movie trailers. I don't have any method of watching movie trailers besides going out of my way on YouTube.
Yeah, but those are still ads, and you go out of your way on YouTube to watch these ads.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Movie trailers are good most of the time. When they're spoilers, that's terrible. When they give the majority of the storyline plot in the trailer, like, that's awful. But yeah, most of the time they're pretty good. That's a good point.
I mean, fundamentally, like, all they are is ads. They're trying to convince you to go see this movie, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I will say,
you're 100% right about that.
Yesterday, I participated in and went entirely gaga over what is, you know, and maybe in my opinion, the highest art of advertising, which is the PlayStation 5 reveal show.
I did hear about that.
The video game press conference is seriously like the height of positive advertising.
Yeah.
You know, maybe that and the Super Bowl are something that people are just like, oh my God, I'm just like on the edge of my seat. I've been looking forward to this advertising for months.
Yeah,
and
that is fair. I do watch, I watch probably video game trailers more than movie trailers. And like hardware releases for like NVIDIA cards or like AMD's new chip or whatever, like I watch those. I'm down. Like, new phones, cool. But yeah, how about this? Most advertising that I'm not seeking out, I don't like.
That's fair, but I would say also, like, I don't know, do you seek out Super Bowl commercials? I don't know. I think it's a hard line to draw.
No, I don't watch the Super Bowl either, though.
Yeah, well, I would say, I personally hate most TV commercials, but
yeah,
when it comes to the Super Bowl, I mean, the quality is there. I usually am entertained by them, so I appreciate it. I mean, there's an art to all of this advertising. There's, even back in the day, there's little like Flash game banner ads that you could play. I'm sure there were some good Flash game banner ads that people liked playing.
Yeah, and honestly, banner ads that are off to the side don't bother me that much. It's when it breaks up the content, that's when it's frustrating. So on mobile, it's really annoying. Literally.
Yeah, especially websites that were not designed for mobile.
Yeah.
That load in 3 pages worth of ads, and it's just like you gotta scroll around them. Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, it's really bad. And there's like pop-ups to sign up for someone's newsletter or whatever on mobile. Like that, it takes up the whole screen, and it's a pain in the ass to click off of it. And like that kind of advertising, like you're advertising to me just to send me more shit in my email when I already get enough shit to begin with. Like I usually just end up blocking some of those sites, like just go into Pi-hole and just be like, I am done with this whole domain.
Oh yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I run a Pi-hole myself. I run ad blockers in my browser. On the web, I try to get rid of advertisements wherever I can. I subscribe to a lot of services that offer ad-free versions, and I try to avoid them whatever way I can. And so I guess why is that? What do you think it is that makes them repellent to us, or that we just don't like them?
They're interrupting my train of thought most of the time. Like I'm either looking at the news or doing research on a topic or just trying to entertain myself, right? And that's, whether it's on my phone or on the computer, it's interrupting what I'm trying to do. To interject, I should buy something I really don't care about, especially right then. Like, most of the time when I see an ad, even if it's something that I probably would have liked, if it's obnoxious, I avoid that. Like, which really I only see ads at work, 'cause I have it blocked pretty much everywhere else.
Yeah.
So.
That's kind of interesting, because when you're going to, let's say when you're watching a YouTube video and it'll autoplay an ad for a few seconds, then you can skip, or sometimes it's a short ad. You're kind of like primed going into that situation that ad is there and that you can get past of it, and you're just counting down the seconds. And, I definitely do my best to avoid paying any attention to it if possible and focus entirely on the skip button or the timer and just try to get past it as quickly as I can.
So I pay for YouTube Premium. I have since it came out. I don't even know how long ago that was. Like, I hate ads to the point where, like, any platform that will let me pay to not see ads, if I go on that platform often at all, I will pay for it. Like, hands down. I mean, even I use Podcast Addict to listen to podcasts, and I know most of the time the podcasts I listen to frequently, like, usually their ads are in the beginning or at the end or whatever, and Podcast Addict has an option to, like, skip the intro. Like, Joe Rogan usually has, like, 5 or 6 minutes worth of ads. So I just skip 6 minutes into it. Like, I avoid as much as possible. Like Hulu, I pay for the advertising free Hulu, and like shows that even come up on there, like, not all shows are advertising free on Hulu, even if you pay for it. And if I see one of those shows, I'm usually, unless I really want to watch that show, I'm usually just like, I'm done with this. Like, as soon as the advertising pops up, I'm like, I'm not going to waste, 1 minute out of every 7 minutes watching an ad. Like, that's, I'd rather sit there and stare at the wall or pay for it to not happen.
Now, how do you feel about billboards on the open road?
Oh, so I've had mixed feelings about this for a long time. I get that they exist. They are obnoxious. I think they look trashy as shit. But they're not... As long as they're not moving, they're fine. Like, they have the LED billboards now. And, like, if they change an image every 30 seconds or whatever, like, that's fine. If it changes every 5 seconds, I start getting annoyed. Like, if I see it change, like, 2 or 3 times as I'm driving past it, like, I'm done with you, sign. Like, fuck off. You don't need to try to shove everything down my throat. But
so what annoys you about that?
It's just distracting. Like, it's something out of the corner of my eye that I have to pay attention to that's not the road, when I'd rather, I'd rather half pay attention to the road and half zone out like I normally do when I'm driving. Especially, those are on the interstate most of the time. Like, just let me drive. I don't need...
Yeah. I do always laugh when I see not laugh, maybe cry, when I see the... those, like, paintings that people do of, like, a Bob Ross style, like, nature painting with just, like, a McDonald's and 5 miles at exit 32B.
Yeah.
kind of billboard in there. Like, I would say, like, personally, I don't really mind billboards from an intention perspective so much. It is more, but when you think about it from just like, nature views interrupted by consumerism.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, ultimately, I don't find billboards that repulsive.
Yeah.
So I think personally, I really dislike the YouTube ads. I really should just pay for YouTube Premium, but this show's expensive to make, man.
Yeah, I mean, I watch it. YouTube's probably one of my main media sources. Like, I probably watch more YouTube than I watch Netflix or Hulu. So it makes sense for me to pay for it. Like,
I would say I actually, many of the hours I log on YouTube are actually on more premium channels where the channels themselves are filtering out ads. So I kind of get around those through Patreon or whatever, rather than the Google provided ads. And instead I'm countering podcast or integrations and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
now, right, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go. You're probably going to make the point I was going to make.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I think we've talked about what we kind of dislike about advertising, and I think we've talked about it from like an attention perspective of just like things that like stick out at us. These things are ugly. These things are interrupting my flow. I would rather be seeing something else. I think that's one type of bad ad, but I think we would both argue that there's another type of bad ad, which is kind of the manipulative ad. And before we get into Russian misinformation and go down that rabbit hole, I mean, I think there's just a lot more common examples of this that are like much more common than maybe you realize. I think everybody knows about product placements now, right?
Yeah.
But advertising isn't something that needs to be conscious or necessarily even have an identifiable source nowadays.
Right.
It can be something like you're watching a movie and a really nice Volvo SUV drives by, right with the camera zoomed in on the hood ornament, and you're like, man, that car looks really cool, and this really cool person is driving the car, and I want to be like that cool person, so I should also drive the same car.
Yep. Or people smoking back in the day in movies. Like, yeah, the whole feud between Camel and Marlboro. Like that, those cigarettes.
No, I didn't actually know about that.
Yeah, like Marlboro threw a crap ton of money into the movie industry back in I think the 50s, 60s time frame, maybe 70s. Where they basically did product placement, and they would pay the main characters more money to smoke, even if they didn't smoke normally. It was pretty jacked up. But
yeah, and that's interesting, because I imagine it's not them selling the idea of Marlboro so much. They don't just have the character very subtly take a cigarette out of a package with a close up of like them in their face. It's much more just like the act of smoking in general.
Yeah. Right.
Encourages people to do that. Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, but I mean, I think that's the kind of the first really big example of a super widespread kind of subconscious, manipulation ad. But I would say even most TV commercials are kind of also a form of manipulation, because it's not necessarily. When you watch a Coke ad, Coke is not trying to tell you about their new flavor or whatever. They're trying to say that the lifestyle that you aspire to can be achieved by buying our product.
Yeah. Clothing and shoe brands are definitely like that. Like you mentioned Nike. They're definitely Nike, Under Armour. Those are definitely brands that have an identity to them.
Very, very few people are actually selling a product these days. People are trying to sell like a mythological story about how great your life would be,
right,
if you only had this thing.
Right.
And this thing is incidental, and you can swap it out with whatever you want. But it's that more they're just trying to sell you this idea that your life will be better if you do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, one of the things that I have noticed a lot recently, I noticed it earlier today on a call with you, is the gaming office chairs. Like those have kind of blown up over the past, 5 or 6 years or so. I've started seeing them, and they're basically just reupholstered garbage, regular office chairs. They just have a racing back seat, and they're still bad for your back. They're still uncomfortable, and they still cost $150, and they're going to fall apart.
Oh, they
in 2
cost
years.
more.
Oh yeah. The upcharge for it being a fancy chair or whatever.
Cool.
But it's basically still worth the same shit that you go to Office Depot or whatever and buy.
Yeah, it's so funny because I saw a lot of my friends online buying these chairs, and I'm just like, oh, they must be designed for their gaming chairs. They must be designed for sitting for 8 hours in a row. They must be super comfortable. And then I looked into it and no, these are actually terrible chairs. Most of them are worse than a regular desk chair.
Yeah.
They just look cool.
Right. exactly.
You're right. Those have totally blown up.
Yeah,
but again,
and they're garbage.
Yeah. And that's not even advertising. That's just like cultural normalization and like not peer pressure, but that kind of thing of just like.
I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about, though. Is that manipulation, though? Is like, those chairs will appear on certain streamers' channels. Like they'll get paid to just have to use that chair for a couple months or whatever. Or like Turtle Beach headphones. Like those are big. And again, like they're not terrible headphones, but they're just normal headphones. You know, they're just marked up for branding or whatever, but they're just normal headphones. They're nothing special. They're not going to make you any better at playing video games. They're not going to, you know, bring to life anything more than just buying a normal $50 pair of headphones on Amazon. And it's
I would say the gaming chairs will make more people watch your stream, though.
Yeah, right, because they're bright orange. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it kind of gets to this point that, like, it doesn't have to be a product placement. It doesn't really matter. And it's not just because it's, like, free advertising or whatever, but, like, also just, like, if you had a gaming chair right now, you're a friend of mine, that's something that would influence me on some level that is not necessarily intentional on your part.
Right.
But just kind of this dynamic where at some level, like every piece of like information sharing is a form of advertising.
Right.
In a sense, even just saying like, you know, I have a lot of friends who are really religious and are just like, I just went to this Bible study and it made me feel so great. Like that's a form of advertising that, oh, come to my Bible study and you will also feel great.
Right.
Not intentional because these people are too self-centered. You know, they're talking about their own experience, you know, they're not necessarily trying to sell it.
Yeah. They're trying to. Yeah, they're not necessarily.
And this is not something that's specific. Yeah, it's not something that's specific to, you know, Bible class or whatever. Just first example that popped into my mind.
Right. Yeah, it's trying to see if you're at all on the same page. That you're like if you agreed with him at all. Just like, you know, if I had a gaming office chair and, you know, you noticed that and you're like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, yeah, thing's awesome, whatever. Like there's that's just reinforcing that mindset and that ego driven thing that, you know, drives us to buy.
I wouldn't
stuff
say necessarily ego
need.
driven, but it's also like a social acceptance part of it too.
Yeah, well that's the core of that is your ego.
Sure. Yeah, I guess the desire to be respected by your peers and
right,
admired or whatever.
Yeah.
By fitting in them really well.
Right. You mentioned, you know, like if someone mentions that they went to Bible study, and they're basically probing on whether you have any interest in that or not. Because if you don't say anything, you just move on. You're like, okay, whatever. No loss, no foul. But if you also go to Bible study or do something similar, you might say something about it.
Well, I would say yes and no. I don't think they, you know, in the example I'm picturing in my head, I'm not necessarily saying it as this person is probing me in particular or even probing at all. It could entirely be a self thing of just like, I just feel really good and I just want to tell people about it. Like,
yeah,
much more than... But like even just that, yeah, that level of like social acceptance and stuff, I think it can also be, it's a form of influence, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's really important to recognize that ultimately successful advertising is about influence, right?
Right.
But there's another side of that, which I would argue is manipulation.
Right. And that's kind of where I was getting to is like there's social norms, like, you know, Bible study is kind of a social norm. Like church is big in our country, and things like advertising, things like listening to the radio or like having cable TV, following the news, stuff like that kind of keeps you within social norms. It keeps you aware of those things that are prevalent in our culture, in our society. And the more like because I've started blocking ads, I haven't listened to the radio in forever. I've lived out of the country a lot and I haven't had cable in like 15 years probably. And because of all of that, I'm out of touch with some things, and like, you know, I talk to about it all the time, but it's interesting the things that she knows about because of advertising that I don't, like I wasn't even aware that it existed. And that's a, you know,
That's how I feel about modern music.
About what?
That's how I feel about modern music.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
I don't listen to the radio. I listen to my curated Spotify playlist occasionally, or I'll go down a certain rabbit hole, but I don't listen to the top 100. I don't know what new songs are out.
Right. I have
to COVID-19. I don't go to bars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
whatever they play at the grocery store.
Yeah, elevator music.
Yeah, whenever I'm in the car, I don't listen to the radio. I listen to podcasts or audiobooks.
Yep. Yeah.
And if I'm, during baseball season, sometimes I'll listen to an Orioles game on the radio, but that's like the limit of, and then I learn about local plumbing businesses and whatnot.
Yeah. There's a surprising amount that like listens to the actual radio every day going to and from work. And she's a lot more in touch with things that are going on in than I am. Like I'm definitely in my own world. I'm in this room, especially for this past couple of months, like most of the time. Like this is my world, these four walls. And the fucking internet, which is an endless, vast chasm of information, but that's a whole nother thing. So like the amount of advertising that's like in our culture now is pretty insane, and the amount of it that we don't see is even more insane. Like there's been a number of podcasts and YouTubers and stuff like that have gone over how social media has been manipulated and stuff like that. Like Smarter Every Day did a whole series on how Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, Twitter are all manipulated in different ways for different purposes. And it really started just from normal advertising. Like all of this stemmed from just normal advertising. And like one of the notes that you have in here is Facebook moving ads from the sidebar into the newsfeed. Like that's a critical thing.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that is one of the two most pivotal moments in modern social media, in the modern social media landscape.
Yeah.
The other one, just for the curious, is when I think it was Facebook who did this first, but they changed from the reverse chronological to the curated timeline.
Yes. Yeah. That was them.
Because that was the moment when we stopped seeing what we subscribed to and we started seeing what Facebook wanted us to see.
Yep.
And then the first moment you mentioned, is when the ads on Facebook moved from the sidebar to the news feed. And what that did is that blurred the line between content and advertising. And you might want to argue, well, they still today they have to put a promoted tag on it, or they have to mark it as an ad in some way.
Right.
But there's actually been studies on children and like how good they are at identifying advertisements. And they're really good about picking out things like billboards and TV commercials, because there's a lot of really great context that tells you that this is an advertisement. This is not the movie you were just watching. And they learn that from a very young age. And like when you're like 5, you can figure that out. But when it comes to ads on Facebook and ads on the internet, these studies were showing that it wasn't until ages like 12 or 13 that most kids could really even identify any ads on Facebook. And, the ages don't necessarily matter. And it's not necessarily just about children. I just think it's this idea that the reason we recognize ads is from context, right? Most ads, as they're formulated now on Twitter, say, are designed to look like normal tweets.
Yeah, they're in not, context.
Mm-hmm. And so without the signal of a promoted link, I wouldn't really know that a lot of those are ads, especially because it's really funny to say this, but very few of the tweets I see are actually from people I follow anymore, which is crazy to think about. But because it used to be that I only saw tweets from people I followed, but then it was you always saw retweets of people that you follow who retweeted other people, but now you see things that friends liked. things that the algorithm thinks you will enjoy. And just most of those people aren't the people I follow anymore. Maybe the people I follow anymore don't tweet, but
yeah, that's
just in general that it's it's hard to distinguish a tweet that was liked by someone I know from an ad or a promoted tweet.
Right. Yeah, they may have not even liked it. That may just be, that company, like they had a hashtag on there or whatever, and that company is promoting whatever thing that they're talking about, or the algorithm just decided like, hey, we're going to do some A/B testing on you. What do you think of this? Like, it's kind of
and especially
crazy.
some of the accounts that are advertising are accounts that I come across often in non-advertising channels. Like, so for instance, I talked about watching the PS5 event, and immediately after that, I hopped on Twitter, and guess what? I saw a bunch of Xbox advertisements.
Yeah, right. Good old targeted advertising.
They're formulated as being from the Xbox account, and I come across tweets from the Xbox account all the time because occasionally they announce things on there or whatever, or they'll just say, Xbox One, the Xbox Series X is coming out or whatever, and that's totally normal to me. And I wouldn't be able to identify that as an ad most of the time.
Right. And they could just be dumping a lot of advertising money into that day because of the PS5 announcement stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
they absolutely were.
Yeah.
Absolutely were.
Right. But you don't necessarily know if it was directly because of that or if it was because of other associations that, Twitter has on you or Google has on you or Facebook or wherever. Mm-hmm. Like the targeted advertising point, I don't know, like that kernel.
Targeted advertising is very interesting for a variety of reasons.
Yeah,
and I think we're starting to get into the realm of shady online advertising, and I think when it comes to targeted advertising, everyone always talks about the filter bubble, and your content is tailored to your bias is the best way I like to describe it. The content is not biased. The content is tailored to your bias.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. So targeted advertising, the problem with these filter bubbles is it's really hard to see into other people's filter bubbles.
Yeah.
Because that's not how the algorithm presents itself.
Right.
And there are now laws about how you can advertise, because there have been companies that have tried to take advantage of Facebook's very fine-grained marketing tools to find people who dislike Jews in a certain 5-mile radius to send them, Nazi paraphernalia or whatever, or try to get them to vote for Trump or whatever. And so recently they've put in some laws that say, I'm not sure if it's actually laws or just Facebook policy, that you can't buy ads and have them targeted by religion or race or, there's some, it's not every protected class because you can still advertise to men or women or something like that. It's not necessarily as protected as say, employment, because that would be, like age, gender, sexual preference, religion, blah, 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 blah. It's not as many categories as those things. But yeah, you did have people trying to abuse the system to find some really, small groups. But the problem is, how do you tell that somebody is running an illicit ad when they're only running it to like such a small group?
Yeah, it's pretty hard. Actually, I remember a story from, I don't know, probably 10 years ago now, like some internet story or whatever. And actually, I thought about doing it to my roommates, but it was kind of insane. When Facebook first came out and there weren't that many people on it and they first started introducing ads and you could do targeted advertising, you could throw like $50 on it or whatever and then narrow down your search for whatever targeted advertising you want to do. This guy basically did that for his roommate to like do super creepy advertising just for his roommate to mess with him. And it ended up working out. And I think they've changed stuff now, so you can't Like you can only shrink it down to a certain number of people. But still, the fact that, especially nowadays, like the whole Black Lives Matter stuff going on, the fact that targeted advertising enforces stereotypes is pretty terrible in itself. Like like technology should be bringing about global communication, not getting us more entrenched in our own ideas and thoughts and worlds. Like it should be used as a tool to expand our understanding of the world.
I think that's a lofty ideal.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's just something that's like hard to say in practice exactly how to do.
Right.
Because it turns out just bringing Facebook to more people leads to genocide and not necessarily more understanding. But
right.
Sorry to everybody in Myanmar.
Yeah. The Chinese firewall and.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the internet, as awesome as it is, it still has a lot of problems in a lot of the world.
Yeah.
I guess most of the world, really.
But yeah, I mean, I think targeted advertising, so from one perspective, Facebook can screen every advertisement that like goes in, but just like from like the activist perspective, or just the kind of like people who like want to know what's going on in the world, like it's very hard to like figure out what's going on in these like very small communities. And if somebody were running an illegal ad, most of the time like the penalties are ex post facto. It's after the fact. The ad gets taken down after maybe everybody that it's needed to reach has already seen it.
Right.
There isn't a lot of infrastructure to stop that at scale. There's not a lot of like watchdog groups with access to all these things, because some of these targets can just be too specific. So now we're kind of getting into this thing. Well, we're talking about, well, why is targeted advertising bad, right? Because people, is it just because we're bad that Trump won? That's kind of like the joke response of like, well, why do people care about Cambridge Analytica? Because it violated their privacy. Because if it violated their privacy, I've got a lot of other people for them to be mad at. People cared about Cambridge Analytica because, quote unquote, they think it helped Trump win.
Yeah, the tactics that were used against the population.
Yeah, but like I would just say that they access some data that they weren't supposed to have, but I mean, it's a little bit give me a break. Everybody does that.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that it's good.
Right.
But
agreed.
Yeah,
it's
kind of surveillance capitalism is the state of the world.
Yeah, right. It really is now. And I think a lot about how to stop that. And really, I think one of the methods to kind of help that is there should maybe always be, at least for platforms that can have this, but there should always be a pay option where you don't see ads. And you should be able to choose, like right now you can kind of choose if your tailored advertising is opt-in or not. Like, it's iffy on how well that works, but you should be able to choose a gradient of how many ads you want to see, if any at all. Like there should be tiered pricing, and you should be able to choose what variety of stuff you want to see. Like if you want to see stuff tailored towards the United States instead of like your specific demographic.
I used to like that idea a lot more than I do now. I think it's very noble in its intentions, but ultimately I think that just goes along with furthering inequality. Because I think if we agree that advertising has some negative effects, creating paywall gardens around high quality feeds that are able to remove advertising creates an environment where the wealthier among us are going to be able to afford high quality advertising high quality information and very low density of ads, whereas poorer folks will have lower quality of information and higher densities of ads. I think that's a positive feedback loop for increasing inequality, and not necessarily if we had a chance to rebuild the system from scratch, I don't think it's the most equitable approach to take.
That's fair. I agree. I definitely agree that it can go bad.
And I think it's just one of those things. It's not an apocalyptic bad.
Yeah, right.
But it's just one of those things.
It's leading down that road, though.
It's a systemic inequality that, it's something that's invisible to 99% of people, but, it just makes the lives of people of lesser means 1% more difficult.
Agreed.
And it's just one of those things that compounds.
Right, it does. What do you think about a federated ad system where, like, Facebook necessarily didn't have control of the advertising you're seeing? They would just have an API that called out to a federated system, and then you could kind of have more say in what ads you see. And
I'm just going to stop you. That already exists.
for Google. Yeah,
not on Facebook in particular, but Google AdSense is literally everyone on this planet has a website. The only way to make money online is through ads.
Yeah, right.
The only way to buy ads is through Google.
Yeah. Okay, so actually, let's talk about that for a minute. As far as online advertising goes, the above board advertising, at least, there's a lot of shady shit that goes on, but the above board stuff, it's basically Google, Facebook, Instagram, which is Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. That's pretty much it, right?
YouTube's also Google.
Yeah, YouTube's also Google. So it's really...
I mean, pretty much everything in tech is GAFAM: Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft.
Right. But I mean, Microsoft and Apple don't even play in that market.
No, I don't think Amazon really does either. I think it's pretty much all Google, Facebook.
Yeah.
To a lesser extent, Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, Amazon does, but only within their world.
Yeah. So, and honestly, their world is the biggest world there is. So,
yeah.
I maybe count them as well. Yeah, I mean,
that is fair. They're
Snapchat,
basically
like pretty much all.
Right. Yeah, they're in the same market
social
as
media
Facebook.
companies.
Right. Yeah, so there's really three.
Yeah. But like as far as getting off of one of the main platforms, if I go to Joe Schmo's website and he's running ads in the corner, I mean, it's Google AdSense.
Yeah. It is. I actually make like $50 a month. Somewhere between like $20 and $50 a month for like websites that I've made years ago, and like me and my buddy Sean made a couple Android apps that like haven't touched in forever, like forgot they existed, and it's just like $20 a month for advertising on like I don't even know who checks them. I have no idea who uses those apps. Like it's kind of crazy, like how prevalent those are.
One thing I don't know, maybe you know this, iOS apps that use ads, do they use Google as well, or does Apple have its own thing?
Apple probably has their own ad network for iOS.
I've never made an iOS app, so I don't know, but that wouldn't surprise me if
actually
Apple had their own thing. But I mean, basically, like what it boils down to is there's a monopoly in advertising. I mean, it's not a monopoly; it's a duopoly or triopoly. But it's really Google app. It's GAFAM.
Yeah.
End of story. Maybe not all the players, but realistically, they're all involved, and nobody else is.
Yeah.
I mean, Twitter's probably the biggest player that's not one of them.
Right.
But I'm also not a professional marketer, so I can't really say that definitively.
Yeah. Well, Twitter definitely makes more on ads than you and I combined. But,
I don't know. Don't they lose money every year? I don't know.
I think they have a lot of server costs.
Profitable?
And I think so. I think they are now.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to tell. the more money you lose, the more successful you seem to be. So
Yeah, I know. I have to figure out that model. It doesn't compute, but it's apparently real.
Yeah. But I mean, so there's a couple things I want to talk about. I want to talk about where we go from here. What the final end state of, what could the next thing be as far as like models. Actually, yeah. Let before we get there, I kind of want to talk about just the need for advertising in general.
Okay.
I guess I kind of touched on this earlier, but like, why do we need advertising?
Yeah, prevailing information to promote either an idea or products. And
so yeah, at some level, like, you need advertising to be able to reach your customers. For a very loose definition of customers, if I'm trying to sell my labor, my customer may be my employer or potential employers. I think that's a form of advertising that's reasonable to exist, but I mean, the real, why? I guess, really what we're talking about is web advertising, right? We're talking about these online advertisements.
I mean, that is most ads now.
Yeah, I mean, the reason they exist is because everyone has a website and everyone needs to make money online. And nobody sells... I mean, some people sell products, but like, how many people sell products versus how many people have a website? The products that people are selling a lot of the time are my blog, these soft articles that people don't want to pay for. It's very, outside of Amazon, not many of the websites I visit mail me something.
Right. Yeah, that's actually...
Most of the websites I visit do have ads.
Right. Yeah, and whether,
really...
Initially, I think that starts off of the idea that, like, I want a website. I want to share my ideas with the world or whatever. I want a presence on the internet. And then people realize their server costs. And like, okay, how do you offset server costs? Advertising. Oh, shit, this makes money.
Or I just need to make a living.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And there's a lot of writers and bloggers and stuff like that there's a lot of tech bloggers that make their sole living on just writing, tutorials and shit. Like, it's pretty nuts. But yeah, most of that is driven by advertising, either bringing people to their site or, bringing them money while they're on their site.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One interesting thing I heard recently, are you familiar with Wired Magazine?
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're actually not doing super well financially during this crisis. And kind of one of the reasons is, I thought most of their money came from subscriptions because they recently went paywall only. I think you maybe get a couple ads or a couple freebies per month or something like that. But I'm a subscriber, so I don't really see ads on their platform. So they probably have a little bit of ad revenue, but I figured most of their revenue came from subscriptions. But it's actually, they organize like a big conference every year that they get like people to go to, and they also get money. Well, also through affiliate links. That's a super big thing. And just in the crisis, even though their subscriptions probably aren't really being interrupted because most of those are paid, they're yearly rather than month to month. That their business is being severely impacted by the inability to have a conference, and people just aren't buying as much on affiliate links.
Dang.
Because you don't need a bunch of new camping gear now and stuff.
Right.
Just like a lot of people have these like kind of like back end businesses as well that you just don't see, that are like ad related, where, I mean, that's basically what it is, right? They're like reviewing products, trying to sell the products that they're reviewing, and trying to sell some articles in a auditorium format rather than, things with corporate sponsorships and whatnot.
Yeah. What are some other alternative revenue streams? Like I brought up the idea of, having the ability to pay for a site or a subscription or whatever to not see ads. Mm-hmm. And personally, I think that should be an option. Like I think there should always be an option for no ads. Mm-hmm. Whatever that is, I would like to avoid ads legitimately without having to go out of my way to block them. And so there's, a lot of news websites have paywalls, and then you found this unlocking the commons thing. So if you could explain what that is.
Before we get to that, I kind of want to dig in. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I really want to dig into that first idea.
The paywalls?
Because, you're really interested, I know, in kind of the second order effects of second order and higher order effects of these advertising revenue methods. And I think there's a really good link between advertising and, especially when it comes to media and like publications, what kind of revenue model you use affects the kind of publication you are, right?
Yes.
Because advertising as a revenue model becomes, incentivizes clicks.
Yep.
And how do you get more clicks? Clickbait.
Yep.
And then when you take away that advertising structure, you're changing, what the content is designed to do. And so I think paywalled content has the really great advantage of being able to have writers be able to write for an audience rather than for clicks, write for clicks, basically.
See, I think it's kind of the same. A lot of the paywall sites, I'm not going to name any in particular, but there's two that drive me nuts most of the time. And I'm just
going to guess the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah. Washington Post pisses me off pretty frequently too. But that's... So...
Are those actually the two?
Yeah. Those are... Yeah. Right. Yeah.
You weren't going to write about The Athletic? I'm the only one who watches sports.
No. But
not now, currently, of course.
The title and the first paragraph or so will be just enough substance to be like, okay, I want to know what's actually going on, and then the rest of it is paywall blocked. And it's the limit on like 2 articles a month or 3 articles a month or whatever the hell it is. Like, that's, for any sane person that's actually trying to keep up with the news, like, that is like 1% of what you look at, right? Like, I didn't even get into this article well enough to know if I want to read it, right? Like, it doesn't actually have any substance besides trying to get you to pay, right? And I've almost done it, but I don't quite support it. Like,
and it's also like not cheap.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's usually at least like $50 to $100 that they want you to shell out.
Yeah, for a year.
Yeah.
Right. And then now I also
more.
have to sign in on every fucking device that I have. Like, nah, I'm good. Like, I use multiple browsers on my desktop and my phone. Like, switching between Chrome and Firefox on both devices. Like, I'm not signing in 15 times, like, let alone work computer stuff.
So yeah, I mean, what you're saying is, those things. First of all, they're really expensive, and then, they are very seductive though. They do kind of want to loop you in if you read a lot, which, like, to be fair, these publications do need our money. I do not believe journalism should be a necessarily. It's still a job for the writers and the publishers and the editors and the production team. So it's not something that, necessarily needs to be given away for free, or it should not be compensated at the least. I think it just really comes down to people need to have high quality sources of information.
Yeah.
And those high quality sources of information need to be accessible. And for a long time, advertising is what made those high quality information sources accessible. Like back in the newspaper days, the newspaper, 50 cents a paper or whatever wasn't enough to actually really make a profit. Most of the profit came from the ad money that went with it, and just the 50 cents was just a little bit to like subsidize that.
Right.
But I think just the problem is that
running printers, ink, paper, delivery, like the whole logistics loop of all of that. And I mean, now, like, delivery is easier now, right? So that should help subsidize some of the cost. Now, I'm not saying at all that they shouldn't be paid. Like, good journalists should be paid well. They should be living a comfortable life. They should make enough money where they don't have to worry about normal day-to-day shit. They should just be able to concentrate on their job. But at the same time,
you want them to be able to produce high-quality content.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Like, that's the end goal. That's all we want. All we want is to read some good shit.
Right. But
and not go bankrupt to read it.
Yeah, the rate at which stuff happens now, like, there used to be a newspaper once a week, right? You get it on Sundays or whatever, and, you know, it would be 20 pages long, and that would be the news for the week. Now we have that every hour from 30 different sources. You know, it's pretty nuts. So I don't know, like, paywalls, the whole supply demand and the costs for paywall stuff is so out of whack right now. I don't know how to bring that balance, like, or how that balance is going to work out.
To be fair, I mean, I think paywalls can incentivize creating really quality content. I think the best example of this is The Athletic, which you probably don't read, but yeah, it's a sports publication where basically the founders got a bunch of VC, hired every good journalist worth their salt, every good sports journalist worth their salt in every market, and now they have the best writers writing for every team in every market.
Yeah. That's awesome. Good
for quality, not best for monopoly, but
right.
You know, ESPN is still definitely a major a major player in the sports industry world. The Athletic only got one of the three major sports reporters, because there's three people who break all the news in sports. It's basically, I don't know hockey, but as far as like baseball, football, basketball, you know, there's Adam Schefter for football. I mean, there's a few others, but I mean, Adam Schefter is probably the biggest. Woj for basketball, and then Ken Rosenthal for baseball. And, you know, The Athletic got Ken Rosenthal. The other two work at ESPN. So, you know, they have like the heavy hitters nationally, some of the heavier hitters in each individual market, and they produce amazing journalism. They talk about stories that they could not tell elsewhere. They don't have to write shitty clickbait articles, and the content is truly great. I never really need to go read other sports sites. I do on occasion, especially because there are certain creators who I think are making things that aren't available at The Athletic that, you know, are still really high quality sports journalism, but like they kind of did it. They made an all-encompassing system where they, you know, were able to pull all the best writers, and it's really, yeah, there's no ads on the site, period, I believe.
That's awesome.
Because all the content is purely subscription. I love it, but it is $60 a year. Yeah. It is. That's
$5 a month.
Possibly going to go up.
Yeah.
It's $5 a month, but also, you know, they have revenue problems because there's no sports, and so people aren't reading sports journalism right now.
Very true.
And, you know, people always, you know, Silicon Valley capitalism is all about growth, and, you know, they're trying to reach out into some of the international soccer market and stuff like that. But
are you there?
A lot of people question whether they can keep hitting their growth numbers forever.
Right.
So, they might have their problems in the wrong lines, but I can't deny high quality content. But like I said, it's $60, and I kind of was talking about this earlier, but the danger with creating paywalls to guard our all high quality content is that it just furthers inequality and makes it so that people of lesser means can't really access that higher quality content. And if you want good news, you have to be wealthy. And if you want to become a well-informed individual, you have to have good news. If you want to be get into a good college, you have to be really up on current events. So you have to read good news, and it's kind of this like, you know, circular feedback loop that will advantage more people, you know, other than some of less less means.
Yeah. So I agree, and I understand that. I don't think the amount of news that comes out is like, most of it's not high quality, right? Most of it's regurgitating other site stuff, and really there's not much analysis really now. There's not, there's analysis week to week, but not grand scheme, in-depth. There's not good there's not that much good journalism, right? It's not most of it now is the world is burning down, right? Which cool, got it, thanks, but I don't need to read that 300 times a day, and I'm sure as fuck not going to pay for that.
I only need to read so many articles telling me that Trump said a thing.
Right. Exactly.
There's a good book called How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler, that talks about, there's different types of reading, but basically you can read for information or you can read for understanding, and you can't do those two things at the same time. And so, most news is reading for information. It's very low quality, not analytical at all.
Right.
It just is feeding you information. And then, there is another type of content that you have to already understand all the information that it contains to read it for understanding. You have to know all the events that happened and such to then try to figure out what the author actually means and understand their points and their analysis. And so that stuff there's not a lot of that because it's really hard to read and process that. So it's not as profitable when you make all your money off of scale.
Yeah. Right.
Being able to produce a lot, being able to get a lot of eyes on the page.
Yeah, I think good journalism though should combine those, right? It should give enough context while explaining something that if you weren't aware deeply of a situation, you would be kind of brought up to speed on it, and then have it explain the implications of that.
There's a place for each of those things. I don't go to the Atlantic for the same reasons I go to CNN.
Right. All right. So you found this thing called Unlocking the Commons by Tim Carmody's, and it's essentially the Patreon model.
Yeah. So Tim Carmody is a guy who used to contribute to kotkey.org. If you're familiar with that, Kotkey is one of the oldest still existing blogs on the web. And basically Tim Carmody wrote this essay and published it. If you search Tim Carmody Unlocking the Commons, you can read it, but I'll kind of pull out a quote. So this is a new alternative revenue stream model for media, which basically it's the Patreon model, but to kind of understand what that means, I just want to read this one quote. The most powerful and interesting media model will remain raising money from members who don't just permit, but insist that the product be given away for free. The value comes not just from what they're buying, but who they're buying it from and who gets to enjoy it. So this whole idea is that you don't have to sell subscriptions. The content doesn't have to be locked behind a paywall or necessarily behind tons of advertising. I think it's okay to supplement with a little bit of advertising, but instead of being manipulative, maybe more good advertising, like we talked about. But that ultimately, instead of furthering inequality by gatekeeping with this high quality information, instead you give it out to everyone and try to find your 1,000 true fans, as Kevin Kelly would say, who can support you, and have them invest in you and the content, and make it about being able to bring the content to everyone rather than making it so that it's a walled garden. Essentially trying to build the commons, the commons that are for everyone, to be inclusive with your audience and give almost everything away for free so that people aren't buying a product, they're supporting you, they're becoming your patron. And then it's okay to give things to your patrons. It's okay to have perks like behind the scenes videos, one extra podcast a month or whatever.
Yeah,
But
access to our Discord server.
yeah. I mean, I think things like that are really only valuable to the true fans anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the whole
So you're not-
the behind the scenes thing is pretty cool for the patrons that I care about, or for the people that I am willing to give them money.
Yeah. And those people will love that content, and the people who don't really care about that probably, aren't going to give you money, or, there's no point wasting your time making that content to cater to a large audience that wouldn't really be interested in it in the first place.
Right.
So, I mean, I think what's exciting about this is it's a way that's very community forward. It removes a lot of the incentives. So there's your incentive structure here. If your incentive structure is purely advertising, then you're trying to incentivize clickbait. You are trying to incentivize subscriptions, but I mean, the best way to do that is to make good things for your community.
Yeah.
Whoever they are.
Produce actual quality content.
And you can do it without really furthering inequality in my mind. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I agree.
And this works really well for media, especially for small independent creators. For bigger companies, it might be a little bit more complicated. And in his article, Tim doesn't really kind of go over how that would work, and definitely leaves it up as I don't know, but you could probably do it. I'm not sure we've really seen a lot of major players do that. I mean, I think I've definitely seen websites with staff writers do that, but not necessarily a New York Times or Washington Post of the world.
Yeah.
It's usually paywall or nothing at all.
Right. That actually could be a pretty interesting model, is if you did something like Patreon, but for journalism, where I could basically sponsor a journalist at the New York Times. Instead of paying their whole $100 a year or whatever, I could just see this dude's stuff, or this, this woman's journalism on a specific topic that I care about.
Yeah. God forbid we fund their editorial board.
Yeah, right. Actually, some of those emails are entertaining, but that's a whole nother topic.
Not for the reason they intend to be.
Yeah. So, all right. One of the topics before we continue on with the rest of it, that I wanted to hit home on, was the incentive structures that are in place now really aren't good for our society in general. The CNN, Fox, MSNBC, that whole clusterfuck of 24/7 news that is basically driven by fear to get ratings up, to get advertising. It's a terrible feedback loop that has caused essentially our whole country and the whole world to kind of just be in this tense state. Granted, we don't have much good world leadership right now, or I don't want to say the whole world. Some countries are doing very well. South Korea is.
We see you in New Zealand. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple countries that know what the hell's up, and they're on it. But most of us don't know what the fuck that we're doing. And on top of that, this whole fear mongering, just churning of news is really. I think it's grinding down society in a way that I don't think is tolerable for much longer. I personally, I've cut out everything recently. I told you a couple weeks ago, I've removed, I don't have Facebook or anything. I have a Twitter. I don't ever get on it. But I cut out Reddit. I cut out Google News. I literally have nothing on my phone now. There is no social media or news on my phone, period. The only way I can look at it is pull up a browser. And then on my computer, really, I have better shit to do than scroll through Reddit and be stressed the fuck out that the world's ending. It's a pretty terrible cycle.
I don't remember who coined this term, but I am quite fond of the term doom scrolling.
Yeah. That's exactly.
Which you don't even need me to define it. You know what it is.
Yeah, it is self-definitive, and it's I think it's pretty terrible with our not so much our generation. I think our generation kind of gets it. Everyone younger than us, definitely, they're either too young to understand it all, or they see what's going on.
They're on TikTok. They can think in like 6-second intervals.
Right. Yeah. They're on a frequency that's much higher than us. But our parents' generation, I think, is struggling.
They're on 20 to 30 minute intervals.
Yeah. 23 minute with a 7 minute advertising break.
Exactly.
Like, God, it's terrible. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I've heard from older people that I know. I'm not going to say how I know them, but there's, friends of friends, family friends, stuff like that.
All right, your parents, you've outed them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more than my parents, but like there's many generations, like my parents' neighbors and like all kinds of stuff that I've run into recently that say like, oh, if they've done the research or whatever, and like, especially on like I've heard people fighting for their rights to not wear a mask. Like that is just manipulation. That is. I personally see that clearly as big business just wanting to open up, right? And saying like, oh, stuff's fine. It's whatever. We just need to get over this coronavirus thing and get the stock market rolling again. And like, really, I mean, there was a whole quote going around for a while about like, grandma fucking dying to get the market back open. Like that.
Yeah.
That's clearly investors that want money. Like, That is a business decision that has nothing to do with the right thing to do. But now they're pushing this whole like, well, you need to fight for your rights stuff, and it's
yeah. I mean, I think that in particular is a really complicated issue.
It is.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily just big business, and the evidence backing and stuff like that is total garbage.
Right.
But I think it's much more of this. There's this feeling amongst a group of people that, a part of it is identity, part of it is just kind of the thinking that like we need to save the economy. So the only way to save the economy is to keep the economy running, because if the economy crashes, things will be bad. And then also it's fear.
Yeah.
If you acknowledge the virus, that means it's real.
Right.
And if you don't, it's not, to you at least.
Yeah. I mean, the news since 9/11 has basically been a like fear-mongering thing, like a fear-mongering entity. That's basically when they switched to real 24/7 news cycle.
Yeah. It's hard for me to speak to that so much personally, just because I was very young around the time of 9/11.
Yeah.
I was not watching a lot of cable news.
Yeah, and I'm not that much older than you, but like that was something that I paid attention to a lot, and like news in general. I remember people watching the 6 o'clock news and like the 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock news or whatever, like when I was supposed to be in bed, whatever, when I was a kid. But
I definitely remember growing up that my parents watched the news every day in the morning before they went to work. It was on the TV in the morning during breakfast. Yeah. And then, sometimes around dinner. The news is its own topic in itself, especially, when you talk about like, what people decide to cover, because you cover extraordinary stories all the time, people come to normalize the extraordinary as being a very regular occurrence, things like that. They can play into a lot of things like,
pretty much its own type.
When we talk about like, I would say when we talk about the police a lot, years of watching TV news and the nightly murder or whatever, and all the gruesome investigations that happen in a city, those have a prolonged effect on people's psyche, and then you just think you need this protection from ever-present violence, when in reality it's actually pretty rare.
Yeah, right. That's part of that clickbait, part of that fear mongering. Like, well, there's nothing else, going on that's important or that we can discuss that's nearly as engaging as, some dude got shot.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Like, it's what's engaging is it's things that make people feel strongly.
Right.
Not in any particular direction, just things that make people feel strongly.
Right. Yeah, polarizing people, pushing people to the ends.
Not necessarily, not necessarily pushing people apart, but I think just, always feeling like you have to have a strong reaction to something.
Yeah, right.
Because, cute puppy pictures, everybody can agree cute puppy pictures make you happy or whatever. Then there's some contrarian who wants to come in and rain on everybody's fun, but, it doesn't, things that are emotional don't have to be divisive.
Right.
But, all things that are important have to be emotional. So let's change gears a little bit. So I think it's interesting to talk about ourselves. We're talking about advertising. Advertising can have some negative effects. So on that note, I'd like to let you know that this episode is brought to you by... No, we don't have any sponsors. But we're a new show. We're not overly well known on the internet, so that's not something we expect. But what is our personal stance on this when this has absolute runaway success, and DiGiorno is knocking down the door? Would we would we take a sponsorship? Like what kind of relationship with advertising do you think it would be ethical to have? What do you think you would be personally in favor of?
So, little backstory for people that aren't aware. Granted, probably half of our initial viewers will be very aware of this, but I've been trying to make this podcast for like 3 years. Like you could literally go look and see when I registered the domain, and then it's something that I've struggled with for a while, and I've thought about for, I don't know, probably hundreds of hours at this point, if not thousands. And advertising is one of those things that I named the first episode. Like this is a thing that I have a problem with, and something that I think is fucking up our society. Now, granted, I do know that this if this could be a living, advertising's probably part of that. I definitely think we should do the Patreon thing, at least to pay for, you literally just had to buy equipment and that's I probably have $2,000 worth of equipment that I've dropped, and like the Adobe suite is not cheap. Just covering things like that would be cool. After that, ads that I never want, just throw Google ads on or whatever, just collect YouTube ads. I would rather be more intimate with whatever advertising that we have and actually review a product. If they want to advertise a product, then review it ourselves, and if we're not happy with it, then fuck no. And also, it ads I think should be at the beginning or the end, and that's it. Breaking up content, I think is not the right way to go. That's pretty terrible.
Yeah. So I mean, we haven't really discussed this in private at all.
No, we haven't.
I will say
those are my opinions. I'm definitely open.
Yeah, no. And I think I'm pretty much exactly on the same page. I will say definitively, this podcast will never be behind a paywall.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Mostly because no one would ever pay for it, but also because we don't believe in it.
Yeah.
And I think unlocking the commons is something that we probably would be very interested in practicing if there ever comes a time where people did want to subscribe to our Patreon, which... See right here, there will be a banner linking to that Patreon.
Yeah. No, I'll throw in a link.
No.
I'll put in money for our Patreon. Fuck it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if we ever got to the point where people actually were willing to sponsor us, yeah, I think we would only try to go above and beyond for our patrons, but we would never try to put the main content behind a paywall.
Yeah.
As far as integrating advertisements into the show, yeah, I wouldn't do Google Ads. Like I said, I don't think advertising is unethical. I think responsible advertising is an important part of living in a capitalist society, which, we can debate the merits of living in a capitalist society, but we can't debate that we are living in one now.
Yeah.
And so if you want to survive, you kind of have to play the game. That doesn't mean the game necessarily shouldn't be changed, but yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I would only advertise with companies that I believed were ethical themselves, and I don't ever want to sell garbage. Yeah. I don't ever want my name to be associated with that. So yeah, I agree. Vetting things ourselves and making sure that it's a product that we believe in. I think that's a reasonable and ethical approach.
Yeah. I would beg to argue that we should, if we take advertising for products, that they be American made. And that is something that a year ago I would have not said, but it's...
We got to bring our gerbs back.
I mean, I think production should be spread across the world and not centralized in any one place.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. I might be amenable, might not be. Depends how much money they want to throw at us.
Yeah, and how good their quality, how good their product is. Like, I'm not blaming everything on China or anything at all. Like, Japan makes awesome shit. South Korea makes awesome shit. Like,
I think also, I don't know. There's a lot of products I personally believe in that come from Germany or
Germany makes a lot of awesome shit,
and not necessarily manufactured, because manufacturing is a very small part of the creation process. Right. But I mean, this kind of gets into, we talked about our personal stance. Like, I think to kind of bring this conversation to a close, I think there's one last topic we wanted to talk about, which was, kind of influencers in general. And kind of figuring like, we talked about what would be ethical for us and what we would feel comfortable with as far as integrating advertising, but like what would be unethical about that? What's the good advertising? What's the bad advertising, especially when it comes to influencers? Because I think influencers are very tricky.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a good example of this that's like right in that gray area. There's been a number of YouTubers that I've watched recently advertising in-ear headphones, right? That are like pretty similar to the little what are the fucking AirPods or whatever. Yeah. And they're pretty much identical to that, but knockoff Chinese brand or whatever. And they apparently sound good. Like, they're actually good quality. But that's still kind of in that gray area for me. Like, that product is probably good enough for most people at that price point, right? But do I feel comfortable advertising something that I wouldn't use, right? Like, it's not good enough for me. It may be good enough for most of the population or whatever, but like, as far as like audio stuff goes, like, if
only we were so privileged to all have your level of audiophile headphones, Tyler.
I know. But right, that's why it falls into that gray zone for me. Like, if I wouldn't feel comfortable putting that on our podcast because I wouldn't use it, right?
My headphones are not very nice. If anyone would like to send me a free pair of Tyler's headphones, I would probably use them. Just being honest.
Yeah. We'll get you a pair of headphones eventually. Yeah. So
once that
I don't know.
Patreon money's rolling
in. Like, granted, I haven't actually seen those in person. I haven't actually used them. And one of my favorite pair of headphones actually are some cheap Chinese. They're literally like chi-fi, like cheap hi-fi headphones, and they're primo. They sound awesome, and they're like $30. And like those, I'd be comfortable advertising, but I don't know. That's definitely a gray area for me.
So, I mean, that's one product. But yeah, I think more generalizably, I mean, I think influencers are kind of slightly ethically dubious because basically what is the job of an influencer? The job of an influencer is to pretend to be your friend.
Yeah.
Or that's a poor way to phrase it. The job of the influencer is to make you think that they're your friend.
Yeah.
Because they could actually be your friend. That's not a precluded outcome, but that's not the only outcome.
Right.
And like, I mean, the whole kind of goal is like you have someone who you think is your friend, who is an aspirational figure to you that can, act on the monetization aspect of it, which is they can convince you to buy things.
So one of the things that I wanted to bring up was we're not influencers. Like, that is not my goal at all.
Yeah. No, we're not.
That's our goal is get information out in the world. My personal goal is get information out in the world so I can sleep better at night. Because this is what I think about when we're bullshitting, talking at lunch or whatever, or if I'm laying in bed and I can't sleep, which is most nights. These are basically those topics, like the things that are bothering me in this world and potential fixes or what I think about them, whatever. And you and I, like, so little background, Connor and I have known each other for a couple of years, and we have lunch pretty much every Tuesday, and these are the things that we talk about. So
yeah, I'm just doing this for fun.
Yeah, we're essentially bringing this.
I would
to
like
light.
to reform the world.
Yeah,
I would like to make the world a better place. That's the dream. Can't always do that at work.
Yeah.
So
we try. Yeah.
So yeah, this is if somebody finds this useful, I mean, I like spending my free time thinking about these things, and this is just a format for me to express myself and try to force myself to think more deeply by kind of talking to people who I think are smarter than me and can challenge me, and
I don't know if I'm that person, but I'll try.
Well, that's fun. We need to get him on the podcast
I know.
sometime.
He's going to be stubborn. He's going to be so stubborn. That's the combination of you, me, and are an interesting mix because we all have slightly different views and we're all particular about specific things that make our conversations pretty interesting. But the ultimate goal of all this is to get ideas out into the world, and hopefully maybe some of them stick and are helpful to people, and hopefully at least inform people to make better decisions at minimum. So I think that's pretty good for the first episode. Before we kind of call it, what should we do next?
Oh, I got this covered. I know what next episode is.
Oh, really?
The next episode. Oh, yeah. You picked the first one. Next one's mine, bitch.
All right. Fair. Cool.
The next episode is going to be about story. And how
we've had this conversation.
Oh, yeah. This is the single most important conversation when it comes to understanding people. Period.
All right. Sweet.
It is understanding how stories shape how humans view the world.
Cool.
And how stories, affect people and affect the species as a whole.
Fuck yeah. I think we're starting the shit off right.
All right.
That sounds good. So
now's the time for the plugs. You've listened this long.
Yeah.
So you can follow me on Twitter at DAS_Connor, DAS_CONNOR.
And I'm at Heart Engineer pretty much everywhere. But I'm pretty much done with social media. So good luck getting a hold of me.
I'm not on Twitter very much, but we're doing a podcast. I might open it up again. All right. So this has been Progress FM, Season 1, Episode 1. Advertising is our enemy. Play us out, Tyler.